Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. So this week is the Persian New Year, or also called Nowruz, and it is celebrated at the first day of spring, or the vernal equinox, I think it is called. I've always loved this celebration because I think having the new year right at the transition from winter to spring makes a lot more sense to me than having it in January when it's still so dark and cold, and I feel like it's very difficult to have the energy to start over at that point in time. With the beginning of spring, it really feels like a period of transition and positive transformation. And so that is what I want to talk about today. I wanted to talk about a few books and sort of recommend a few books that have this transition or transformation of a positive kind as a central theme in the books. And these are all books I've really enjoyed and that have brought a smile to my face. I hope they might be able to do the same for you. So I'm going to start off with a book I read last spring, and it is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. It is the story of four women with various different life circumstances, and they all decide to share the rent for renting a villa in Italy for a month. So they spend 1 month together in April, and they're all strangers at first, so they have a few hurdles to get over before they really open up to each other. But it's such a positive and warm and welcoming book. They grow so much in the span of the book and sort of settle down and become more themselves, more true to themselves by the end of the book. And I found it to be such a perfect pick-me-up. It is funny also, and I just loved it, so I would highly recommend that one. Another classic I wanted to recommend for a positive transformation is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I think when I think about the transformation aspect of all of these books, I wanted to look specifically at books with where the main character actually grows and that they sort of acknowledge that fact. And with Elizabeth, I think at the start of the book, I think she thinks of herself as someone who is pretty settled in her personality and in her worldviews, but she is still challenged, and she also, I think, comes to terms with her own limitations. She realizes her own shortcomings by the end of the book, and it is also, again, a very heartwarming and fun story. And I mean, I probably don't need to say much more about Pride and Prejudice, but ever since seeing people talking about this book in regard to the readathon that Steve from Steve Donahue is hosting this month, I think, this month, I've been really eager to reread this book. It is one of the first classics I ever read, but I think in general, Elizabeth and Darcy's transformation over the course of the novel, and how they both, I think from the start, think that they are pretty firm in their personalities and still are able to grow through being challenged, and also being I guess quite positive in reaction to the challenges, if that makes sense. Next, I wanted to mention a few children's books, and first is a picture book called Grävlings Resa by Cecilia Heikkilä. This is a Swedish picture book, and it is about a badger, I think Grävlings badger in English, he was sort of an adventurer as a young man, and then he ends up settling down on this island, and one day a small animal ends up stranded on his island, and with his arrival the badger is sort of thrown into a new adventure. So it is the sort of the transformation again, and a start of a journey, which I think is often the case with those kinds of books. But it is just beautifully illustrated. It's definitely one of my favorite picture books I've ever come across. One of the things I love about Cecilia Heikkilä's art style is her way to illustrate light and warmth in her her illustrations, and I just think it is so lovely. There's not a lot of text to this, so I think maybe even if you don't know Swedish, you would be able to enjoy this sort of just through the pictures. But I wanted to mention it in case I have any viewers who are able to read in Swedish. I do hope that this will be translated into English because I think it is a stunning picture book. The story itself is also sort of a timeless and all ages kind of fun adventure and story of someone who I guess thinks that they're too old to go on adventures and then being swept up by events and having a lot of fun along the way. A much more easily accessible children's book, we have Anne of Green Gables by Ella Montgomery. It follows Anne, who is an orphan girl and is adopted into the house of a pair of adult siblings, and they're not really expecting to adopt a girl, but they end up taking her in because she is already quite dear to them soon after her arrival, so they're pretty much immediately connecting with her. And I think in part it is about Anne's growing up and sort of settling down into a family that actually care for her, finding a home and everything like that. But it's also, I think, Anne isn't the only one who's transforming throughout this book. She has an effect on everyone she meets, and in very positive ways. Everyone is more prone to opening up when they've met her. They connect to her without really meaning to, and I think in general it has a few things similar to the Enchanted April, where one of the main characters has this effect on people, where her presence is enough to make people bloom around her. And the last sort of children's or young adult book that I wanted to mention is Jane, the Fox and Me, written by Fanny, Britt, and illustrated by Isabelle Arsenault. This is a graphic novel that follows a girl she has very low self-esteem. She's sort of she's sort of an outcast, and she's very uncomfortable with her body, and she has a lot of problems in regard to her self-image. And most of the book or most of the graphic novel is told in black and white illustrations and text, obviously, but most of the art is done in black and white illustrations when she's talking about her life. She is reading Jane Eyre, and part of the graphic novel is sort of sections of what she's reading in Jane Eyre, and all of those are told in color. It's sort of this parallel of this more dramatic and magical life that Jane Eyre is living, in contrast to her more dull and lifeless life in comparison. As things are happening over the course of the book, color is seeping into her story, and I just think, especially in terms of art style, so the story itself is really good, and I think it is very relatable to a lot of people probably. The way it can feel in school to be different, especially in that age, as a young teen or as a child, to be different, and how it can really feel like it's such an enormous thing. The writing, it really gets that across and gets her character really honestly and authentically across. But the art is so good at showing the way that the story changes over the course of the book, and showing how the emotional experience of the protagonist is changing. And yeah, I think, again, it is a really good example of this positive transformation, especially in regard to art, how art can reflect that story as well. The last fiction book I wanted to mention is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.G. Pearce. This is a historical fiction novel. It is set during the Second World War and it's about a woman who applies for a job. She thinks that she's going to be sort of a journalist, I think, but she ends up being an assistant to a women's magazine. She ends up with the task of opening up and reading all of the mail that comes into sort of a, what is it called, like an advice column that Mrs. Bird runs. So she is responsible for going through the mail and then choosing the letters that Mrs. Bird is going to answer. But Mrs. Bird has very strict rules when it comes to which letters she will answer. She will not answer anything that is too scandalous. So basically the people who need the help and the advice the most are left without an answer. And so the protagonist of Dear Mrs. Bird ends up starting to answer these mail herself, which she isn't supposed to do, and ends up in trouble after a while. It is about starting a new job and finding sort of the purpose and way of life. So in that sense it talks about this transformation in regard to her sort of career and professional life and what she wants to do with her life, but it's also about how she changes as a person, both in regard to work but also in regard to romantic relationships, with friendships, and how all of the things around her, like the new job and the people that she meets alongside it, as well as the war and how that affects her, and again with a positive edge to it. This is one of, I think, the most enjoyable books I've read. It's not perfect, it definitely has its flaws, but I found it to be very addictive, and I felt completely in it when I was reading it. And yeah, as I said, it does deal quite a bit with having this new job and how that is changing the character, how she grows with it. That theme is also relevant for the next book I wanted to mention, which is My Salinger Year by Joanna Rakoff. And this book I mentioned very recently because I read it at the beginning of the year, but this book is a non-fiction book, so it's a memoir about the author starting to work for a literary agency in 1996 to 97 New York. Again, it is about this author's sort of transition from being a student to working her first real job. The way she sort of grows with a job is part of it, but she also has quite a lot of other things going on in her life, in particular relationships with her boyfriend and with friends and everything that is changing. And I think in general it's just a very significant part of her life that this book chronicles. While she has things that she's going through and hardships and setbacks, in general I felt that this definitely showed a very positive journey and outlook on the journey itself. And the last one I have is also a memoir, and it is Leap In, A Woman, Some Waves and the Will to Swim by Alexandra Heminsley. I feel like this is probably the epitome of a positive transformation. It is about the author sort of relearning how to swim, and the reason that it's such a strong positive transformation is because the author was actually quite scared of water before she sort of started this journey. She had some negative experiences with water, not just in terms of swimming, but just in general. I think she talks about her apartment being flooded. She has a very negative starting point with her relationship with water in general, and she takes on this challenge of learning to swim. Along the way you can see her being uncomfortable and being challenged and being uncertain, but it is also it is a book about her sort of overcoming those challenges and and finding something really positive and good throughout the journey. I think it is also very inspiring to move your body and to be able to have that strength within you, which again makes me think of spring and with new strength and with renewed power that the new season comes with. So those are the books that I wanted to talk about today. Let me know if you read any of these books, or if you have any recommendations for me with books that deal with some kind of positive transformation of a character, or even change in the weather from winter to spring. I hope if you celebrate Persian New Year that you will enjoy it and have a good time. And even if you don't, then I hope you enjoy this transition from winter to spring officially. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!